BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today we're going back to 2017, one of the more recent cases we've covered on this channel, and we're going to be talking all about the case of Jennifer Mee. And 2017 is actually a very particular year because that is the year of her conviction rather than the start of all of the events. Now, this was one that was first introduced to me from the podcast Court Junkie, as opposed to Crime Junkie. There's also a podcast out there called Crime Junkie, but I've never followed that one. I just know that they've been in a little bit of trouble recently for some of their things like accusations of plagiarism and all. But overall, Court Junkie is a relatively kind of well put together production. It's entertaining all the same, and you get to learn some things. So they introduced me to this case of Jennifer Mee, and they did a lot of the background information. Highly recommend their episode. There are a few things that we're going to talk about, though, that are going to be quite different, though, than what they have. So Jennifer Mee was somebody who was brought to not only national but international attention, mostly through the work of early morning daytime television, because she was known as the Hiccup Girl. A girl who had a case of hiccups for 5 weeks straight, hiccuping 50 times a minute. First, I feel your pain there. If I get the hiccups for more than 20 minutes, I feel like death. 50 times a minute, nonstop. And when you listen to the audio of that, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's so rapid. But it was actually the result of a form of Tourette syndrome. A very rare form of Tourette syndrome was causing her hiccups. And they did stop after 5 weeks, but it's now being controlled with medication. But this is one that became a little bit sad because the case of Jennifer Mee turns out she is receiving a lot of attention and notoriety and just fame and recognition because she's been on all these television shows. That leads to people who start contacting her on the internet. Now, this is where things can go to a very bad place. We're talking a lot about this over the past 2 weeks. I mean, this is just another example of that. She starts meeting people from all different backgrounds, and she gets caught up with some of the wrong people, and that leads her to drugs eventually. Eventually, she gets caught up in drugs. She gets caught up in a sort of dysfunctional relationship. And over here, we're on the website, thesun.co.uk, and we're going to be looking at their article. And what we have to say about that is that how come she was convicted? Now, what we have to say is she is in jail for the rest of her life, being convicted of the murder of a young man, even though she didn't pull the trigger. Mee was implicated in the murder of 22-year-old Shannon Griffin, all because she lured him into an alleyway where he was shot by one of her pals. I really don't like that word, pal. It was just, okay, but you get the idea. Although she did not pull the trigger, under Florida law, she is just as capable for the murder as the shooter. She had invited Griffin to an abandoned spot under the pretense of selling him cannabis. Once two of her pals robbed him at gunpoint, but there was a struggle and the gun went off. During the trial, the court heard a taped phone call between Mee, meaning Jennifer Mee, and her mom, which directly implicated her in the murder. And she told her mother, "I didn't kill nobody. I set everything up. It all went wrong. It all just went downhill after everything happened." Deliberating took the jury just 4 hours to find her guilty of murder. And this is something that you just gotta kind of have to deal with. You heard all that right there. They lured him to an alley, and they thought they were going to be selling him cannabis. But the sort of Jennifer Mee defense is she did not know that her associates had guns on them. And I believe it's only one firearm. She didn't know that the gun was present. But under Florida law, she is just as guilty as they are for being not only someone who was a participant, but the orchestrator. She set it all up. She directed it. So it's like, you got to just kind of look at the big picture. What would you say about that so far? She is the one who arranged this. They lure a person to an alley. Someone has a gun, whether or not Jennifer knows about it, and the situation gets out of control. Somebody pulls the firearm, and they shoot Shannon, and that person is now deceased. What should Jennifer Mee have been charged with, in your opinion? Now, I would say, though, this law in Florida does not relate to the entirety of the United States of America. And I'm going to say one thing that I don't know if it's going to be a popular opinion or not, but this is a good thing. It is a good thing to have these types of laws because it's like we talked about the case of Denali Bramer on this channel where somebody orchestrated a murder. A guy is writing to Denali Bramer on the internet, and this is the case of where the teen was offered $9 million to murder her best friend, and she has this guy in the Midwest. He's not in Florida, or the murder actually took place in Alaska. This guy in the Midwest is messaging her on the internet saying that if she murders her best friend and sends him some evidence of it, he will give her $9 million. That individual was charged with 9 years in prison. I mean, he's charged with conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to 9 years in prison. I was thinking he should have gotten life because he's the one who orchestrated the murder. He's the one directing the whole thing. And if it hadn't been for him coaxing somebody else into the situation, the murder most likely would not have happened. Once again, orchestrating conspiracy to commit murder, directing the whole thing. I mean, it's the exact same stuff that Jennifer Mee was talking about it, setting the whole thing up. But he was sentenced to only 9 years in prison, and I was like, he should have had a much more severe sentence. Doesn't mean that the participant in it should not be let off. She committed the murder too. She should also get a very heavy sentence. And I believe in that case of Denali Bramer, the sentence was 30 years. But what do we do with Jennifer Mee, someone who is once again directing the thing? I would just say that you have to have these types of strict penalties because it's like you have to have the type of strict penalties for the person orchestrating the thing, the director, the person who's setting the thing up, because they are responsible. They kind of create the sort of scene by which everything should happen, and they are creating the illegal kind of web of possibilities for things to happen. And if something happens that they didn't anticipate, they have to be held responsible. And there's even a deeper reason. If you were to give her a light sentence for that, it would turn the legal system on its head. Because listen to her defense even. I didn't know that they had a gun. Okay, yeah, so you were just going to rob him and get him beaten up and stuff. But well, what if he had died just from that? I mean, you have to be held responsible. What's next? What is next? When I say it's going to turn the legal system on its head, what are you going to do? Shoot somebody in the face saying, "No, I wasn't trying to kill them. Yes, I shot the gun and it hit them in the face and they were bleeding everywhere, but I wasn't trying to kill them." Is that going to be a type of legitimate defense? If you are doing an illegal action, you assume all responsibility for the consequences of any other illegal action that could kind of mushroom cloud out of it. If you're going to blow your life up, it's just going to fall down in smithereens. Let's just sort of say that. And I was first introduced to these types of laws actually watching World's Wildest Police videos. Did you ever see that? Sheriff John Bonnell would host it. And it would sort of be like, there was one time there was a shootout, and an innocent person was killed in a shootout. And the perpetrator was charged with murder. And I was like, what? How did they know his bullet killed the innocent person? And they're like, he was charged with murder because he was conducting an illegal action, and he assumes all responsibility for any other thing that goes on there, even something such as an innocent person gets killed in a shootout. And I've heard about that in other things. There's another case, it was a bank robbery. I forget the exact specifics and the location, but the police officers were, firing shots into the bank to shoot the bank robber. And it was a policeman's bullet that killed one of the hostages. And that at the same time, they still charged the bank robber with murder because same reason with Jennifer Mee. You assume all responsibility for any of the illegal actions that happen or any of the catastrophes that happen, the catastrophic actions that happen because of your illegal wrongdoing. You created the illegal scene. You were the one who broke the law and created this giant mess. Now you're the one who has to deal with the consequences. That's kind of how it works. And I think it's a good thing that we have these types of laws to actually not only crack down on cases that get off too lightly, like that example that we mentioned from Alaska, but then also to just so people cannot find ways to kind of weasel their way out of punishment, it's good to have this type of strict law in place, even though she didn't actually, pull the trigger herself. We had a very similar case on this channel dealing with Annika Ersberg. We called it the stolen meat murders, although that case isn't most famously known by the name. But with the case of Annika Ersberg, she was a Swedish national in America, and her boyfriend, Bob Cox, murdered two people. Annika Ersberg was the kind of distractor of it. She just distracted two people, so while they weren't looking, her boyfriend, Bob Cox, pulled out a gun and shot them. One of them was even a police officer, and she ended up doing 28 years in prison. And it was just a whole debate. It's like, is that a fair sentence? Well, the difference between somebody like Annika Ersberg and Jennifer Mee is Jennifer Mee set the thing up. She's the orchestrator. She's the guiding force. She's the person, by her own admission, that is, who is kind of arranging the robbery, creating the illegal scene, setting the illegal stage, mind you. And the only thing I could say that could be somewhat lighter for the case of Jennifer Mee is that maybe life with parole as opposed to life without parole. A life with the possibility of parole. That's the only thing that I could say could be lighter, because it's like, if you are the person who is kind of putting Shannon in that situation where he's getting robbed and then the situation escalated and he ended up dying, all right, you're responsible for that. What about the cause of intent? With murder, you have to prove intent, right? Well, what were you intending to do? Were you intending to just shake hands in that alley and shake hands in that parking lot, wherever it was? Were they just trying to kind of give him a back massage or something? No, they were really trying to mess his day up. They were sent him there to rob him, and the illegal action got out of control. What was the intent? Was it to do anything legal, or was the intent to do something illegal? And if your illegal action spirals out of control and a person dies from it, then that's murder. That's how the legal system works, and I think that that's actually a good thing. We've talked about this in the case of Madeleine McCann, where it's like, if the parents were drugging their children, in that case Jerry and Kate McCann giving Madeleine McCann sleep aid drugs, like unlawfully, that is, something that she shouldn't have been taking, and that caused disorientation that led to her death, then that would be murder. They intentionally gave their kid something, and that led to her death. That's murder. So it's, murder in the sense that they did something illegal, and then it kind of ballooned out of control. It spun out into a destructive cycle. So, it's not necessarily the best ending result in the world. A lot of people want to say that, she's learned the error of her ways, and the person who wrote a book about her, M. William Phelps, who wrote a book called One Breath Away about this case, he really says that she is not a sociopath. She should not be in prison. She's been rehabilitated. He's met with lots of sociopathic women, and she's not one of them. This is an unfair sentence. The only thing I have to say about that is we've talked a lot about sociopathy on this channel, and just because she is not a sociopath, that does not mean that she is not guilty. People can commit murder without being sociopathic. People can orchestrate the murder without being sociopathic, or better yet, people can arrange to have someone robbed and have someone go through some sort of illegal action, and then that can escalate and get out of control, and that turns into an illegal setup where they have to bear responsibility for the consequences of their actions. Even if everything Jennifer Mee is saying is true, yes, she didn't know they had a gun, she just thought that they were going to rob him, well, it's like one thing led to another. It's like a domino effect of illegal activities. She pushed the first domino for conspiracy to commit robbery. That went to conspiracy to commit murder, to actually committing murder. Those things fall down. And if you do something illegal, then, you can't guarantee that someone's illegal actions are just going to stop. You might have only had the intent to commit the robbery, but then you don't necessarily know what could be the consequences from that. What if someone died in the result of any other robbery? Would they not be legally responsible? Yes, absolutely. And the question about intent is, what were they intending to do? Were they intending to do something legal or illegal? And then, they have to be responsible for other people's deaths. That's just what we're saying. You can get your lawyers to mess with the terminology and get people to plead to a lighter sentence. I heard this thing on Forensic Files yesterday. It almost blew my mind. It was just like somebody said something about passion-provoked manslaughter. Like, this guy got his charge reduced because he murdered his wife, but his wife was having an affair, so they reduced it to passion-provoked manslaughter. What the hell is that? Our legal system is messed up, I will tell you. It is messed up. And Jennifer Mee is dealing with some of the messed up parts of the legal system. Maybe Alan Dershowitz was right. It's not necessarily about fairness, it's about the legal teams fighting it out. But there's a reason why people don't like Alan Dershowitz. But sometimes that's a bitter pill.